A warm welcome, dear viewers, to our series Meaning of Life today, which is about one of the most exciting topics, relationships, and above all, what subconscious patterns we bring into our relationship, and how we may be able to annoy our partner relatively quickly here and there. And that's what I'm talking about. My guest today, Josua Kohberg, is here. And I'm very happy. Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Joshua. Yes, we both have a lot of experience when it comes to relationships, and also the audience, of course. But what I find very exciting is how the subconscious and our inner conflict issues that we've saved from childhood can then really be lived out in our relationship without us noticing.
No, exactly. That is actually the most exciting point when we think about a relationship. At the beginning, we often have the feeling, this being in love. On cloud nine, rose-coloured glasses. In fact, if you look at it from the unconscious level, then we're actually always just looking for a suitable counterpart. So the aspiration of human life is actually to become a round personality. Of course, nobody is like that, so now we take two halves, I always call it C personalities, then they link to each other, and then there are two round personalities. So that means, to de-glorify the topic of relationships a bit, we're always looking for someone who serves us what we don't have ourselves, completely unconsciously. Now, that has nothing to do with us saying, oh, what are they supposed to look like, and what kind of environment should they have, and so on. It's really just about the unconscious level. So we'll link with each other and meet our needs. Quite often, it has to be said, men then look for their mother as a reflection, women for their father. These are the classic topics, but not everyone.
Or the opposite.
Or the opposite, exactly. But these are topics where we can connect. And now we're developing further in the course of our relationship, and we are, so to speak, becoming a bit rounder. The other one may develop in a different direction. Exactly. And then suddenly it no longer fits because we no longer fulfill what we're actually looking for. And I'll say the only chance of a real, lasting, useful relationship is to say, I look at myself as a personality. Only then I actually have a chance to live together with my partner and to have a really fulfilling relationship.
Yes, right now this problem of our society comes to my mind too, that the men always, once Dr. Eckhart van Herschelhausen showed it so beautifully, the doctor takes the nurse, and the boss the secretary, and the pilot the stewardess, and then at some point we'll have two left. And then somehow they don't really fit. But why not this at eye level? Where is the conflict in men?
Well, I think there is a deep fear. And if you break it down to the family history of the person, there is overlapping. So, well, let me say, we often take responsibility for parents, for example. Also, not consciously, this is a completely unconscious action that's taking place. I don't know. Our parents are having an argument, or one parent is very sick, or if we have financial problems, then we take on the burden and we believe we can solve it. And with this feeling, so to speak, because we're now talking purely about the limbic system that's not analytically comprehensible. If I said that to someone, you live the programming of your father, and he's never looked at it, he'd say, what nonsense. Because it cannot be deliberately grasped. You have to get that through the feeling. And if I almost never do that, then I always look for a suitable counterpart in terms of feeling. And I'll say the Oedipus complex would be a classic now, which is also known from psychology, where you say, okay, someone looks for a suitable partner for their own behaviour. And the two also link, so they also fit together, because they in turn fulfill the other again as a counterpart. And that can then be about security, about financial resources, about recognition. So in the end, this actually goes quite deep. Because, of course, I have a person with whom I share my life somehow. And if it gets difficult, I should start asking, myself early enough, what am I doing here? What do I also put into the relationship? And there's such a nice picture that I often use. When I am a mobile phone customer, then at the beginning they do everything to ensure that I sign up. I'm being courted, I get something extra. If I sign the contract, I'll get something in addition. The man brings flowers. He's doing customer acquisition, and at some point, the woman or the man become existing customers. All of a sudden, I don't care anymore, so I don't bring my wife any more flowers. I don't care anymore. I don't take her out for a romantic dinner. It's all normal. I only look at my cell phone in the evening and I'm not interested in my partner. Then I'm the existing customer business, and that's when I should start thinking, would I like to maintain existing customers, or would I prefer to stay in my lively relationship?
Yes, the topic is also that when I notice as a woman that my husband sees me as an existing customer, the question would certainly be, where do I treat myself like an existing customer? I mean, that is exactly the high art as a woman of not blaming the man. You fool, you don't even see me anymore. But basically it just reflects to me that I don't have a view for me at all. So I believe that if a woman then switches at that moment and redefines her value again for herself, then all at once, I don't know, she's going to the sauna or meeting out with friends. She could maybe go back to this acquisition phase again.
Absolutely. And then also look, what is my partner fulfilling for me? So where do I have deficits? What do they fulfill for me? And what would it look like if I didn't have these deficits? And of course, it's crucial to take your partner with you on the journey. That means if I do this alone, the chance that the relationship will collapse is extremely high. And that's what I also experienced in my first relationship. I actually developed away from my wife. So we just didn't fit together as a C anymore. And with my current wife, Simone, we've been together for 13 years, almost 14 years, and we go the way together. That's not funny either, if you look at the programs together. That also leads to real challenges. But the crux of the matter is we can reflect on that together. And then we can also take it with humour. So I always say when the partner says to you, at 45 you're becoming more and more like your father, you have to think about it, because you are becoming more and more like your father, because you're living these programs when you don't pay attention.
Yes, in my first marriage it was very interesting to see I've always kept a mess. And my husband was really upset when he came home and it wasn't tidy. And I never understood why my subconscious couldn't just keep order. Then I also had a regression. When I was a child, I was always with my grandma, and she always said to me, you have to be a good housewife, always dusted with me, because otherwise no man will stay with you if you are not tidy. And I wanted to prove to my grandma, look, even if I'm not tidy, the man stays there anyway. And then I kept this mess to prove it, because this girl wanted this proof. He really loves me, so.
You actually lived your inner rebels, so you rebel against grandma, who isn't even there and doesn't even know anything about it.
Exactly, and my ex-husband suffered from it.
Interesting.
Yes, and that's why I find these points of views always amazing. It is then also an enrichment in a relationship when you get this knowledge. It is enough if the man is aware of this and then says, you know, even if you are tidy, I still love you and I will stay one way or another.
And that would be this development process, when both develop together. Well, I'll say the optimal goal would actually be that two round personalities maintain a relationship. And then that lying 8 would flow between the two. That would be the best. But that's hard to do, because when we're really a completely round, balanced personality, then we don't need to be here on this planet anymore, because then would have gone through all the programs. But in the end, the striving to live a relationship in which we can be together, but don't have to be, so we would both be viable, that would actually be the best, that we make a very conscious decision and say, we live together. We want to move things, we want to develop together, we might want to have a business together or to do something together, where we then see the added value for society.
So you are of the opinion that I also watched another interview yesterday from a book author on the subject of partnerships and relationships. That was also the topic. Do you always have to be interested in the same things? We also had this pattern in our first relationships, where we were the ones who always had to go into depth and analyse, and all our partners back then, they weren't even interested in it to go really in depth. Of course, at some point this frustration comes when you think, he has to look for this too. But then I thought, in conclusion, it is maybe also a learning task to love the other for who they are, without wanting to push them in one direction.
Well, I think it's possible, but I'll say now, especially in these areas of mental development, of spiritual development, I consider it problematic. So I'd like to take a picture and also stay completely neutral. Imagine you somehow have a racehorse and you have a sheep as an example. You'd harness them to a carriage. The two don't fit together. You should have two of the same animals. Then they'll also move in the same direction. I think that's something that is not clear in many relationships, that actually the rough direction should at least fit.
Speaking of racehorses and sheep, this situation we have in Germany comes to my mind, or worldwide actually, the situation of sheep and racehorse, where now really, because of this infection, I don't even want to mention the name now, otherwise we'll get everything blocked again, but the relationships also came into conflict. And I think it's so interesting when we take this example of this pandemic, then there is one partner who suddenly starts now to question everything and believe nothing at all, and says, I have to deal with the topic from scratch now. And the other one, who has such a coordinated, supervised thinking source of information. I found it so nice, the phrase supervised thinking for various mainstream channels. What kind of real conflict is behind it? It's not the subject. The one...
Just bring it to the surface.
Just bring it to the surface. But what is the primal conflict of these relationships now?
Well, I think... So now this is just a guess. I don't know any such relationship. That's why I can only express in a remote analytical way what I believe where the real problem is. That these people have lived side by side for years. And I always give such a beautiful picture. When I have a tube of toothpaste and I squeeze it together, then what comes out is what's in the tube, so toothpaste. If I had filled chicken poop in there before, and then chicken poop would come out. So what comes out of us under pressure is what we have poured into ourselves for a long time. And people come under massive pressure, especially now, of course, because of fears, perhaps because of financial worries, because maybe suddenly the situation is that I've somehow been sitting in the apartment with my partner for 3 months, both in home, and I've never been in the situation that I've been with this person for so long.
Had to endure them.
Had to be confronted with kids, and now pressure is exerted, and then it comes out what we put in. And I'll make an example too. For example, if we have a woman who's interested in beautiful things, maybe keeps the apartment beautiful, who likes to cook, enjoys good food, and I'll say as an extreme counterexample, we then have a man who's such a chav who just loves football and eats sausages as an example. So also value-free. I don't want to judge that either, but these two people, if they have now basically lived side by side, they have established a life for themselves. So maybe the woman has a circle of friends, the man has a circle of friends. They each saw each other now and then, like in the evening. They may still have some kind of relationship, but that's a relationship, for example, as I would assess it, they can't even go on vacation together. They always need a few other couples so that they are distracted from each other. And now, of course, to sit at home for 3 months, now the pressure's so strong, now it's exploding. And they could have looked at it much earlier. But it's often the case that we created environments so we stayed together because the house is financed and because, well, we have children. We can do it. So, and that is, of course, difficult for human development.
One assumes now that the time of the transformation, which is probably taking place now, that those who have not yet dealt with these topics and did not want to look, of course their heads are now being dipped really nicely into this topic. relationships? Do you see it as there is always this, well, there is definitely a pattern, like you have to stay together forever, you mustn't separate ever?
Also cultural patterns. Monogamy, as an example, is classically anchored in our culture. There are cultures where that isn't the case at all. So there's always the question of what is right and what is wrong. In the end, it's just a question of what do I feel about it. If the choice for me is monogamous coexistence, then it's right for me. But to say now, I judge someone, or as we did until 10 or 20 years ago, that couples who are homosexual will be judged. So honestly, what does it matter to us how these people live their lives? So that means we always look at it and judge. And that's actually how it is with us too. When we judge ourselves, we actually already have the first problem. So if I accept myself as I am, then it also feels a lot easier for my wife to accept me as I am. If I constantly criticize myself and I'm dissatisfied with myself, then it'll spill over. Then she'll be dissatisfied too.
Yes, the subject of ratings also springs to mind when a person constantly has the need to evaluate, correct or denigrate others. Because it's all their own subject. Unless then it concerns you that you would be hurt by it, then it would be your topic too. But I also think when you become aware of it, that when what I see in the counterpart, I don't know, also the beautiful, then I also see the beautiful in me. And it goes the same way with this. Look, what is she wearing, or how is he running around? And of course, those are the internal conflicts too, right?
Absolutely. And we always only see our own inner images, which is also interesting when you reflect on language. So we're now talking in German, and we believe that we are now listening to each other. But in fact, we only get a coding of 0-1 pulses. So that means there's a sound wave that's converted into an electrical impulse. So our brain makes a biochemical process and turns it into a picture. So now our pictures probably fit quite well because we're having a nice conversation. But the fact is, no matter what I perceive out there, I always generate my perception on the basis of my previous experience. And if I now reflect on a partner, for example, or no matter what happens to me, then I can actually always infer that what I'm experiencing right now, I generate from my experiences. And when these experiences get stronger and stronger over the years, decades, then I get the same experience over and over again. That's why we become stiffer in old age, physically stiffer, behaviourally stiffer, because we close ourselves more and more and say, this is the truth, so that's my life. And if I never look at anything, then I have the claim that I have the optimal life and everyone else is wrong. And then I become a religious fanatic, then I become a state fanatic, then I become... Well, in some form, I always become a fanatic.
Yes, then it is just this denunciation which is also spreading right now. There seems to be a lot of frustration in people. These ratings and devaluations, if one encounters the same recurring thing over and over again in a relationship, so if you are always being cheated on, what kind of pattern could be hiding behind?
This is, of course, also a classic now, actually. So to be betrayed means that a deception will be lifted somehow. So that's the relief of deception, so to speak. And when I say I've always got the cheating factor, then I would actually have to see how I feel about it. We're now talking about the limbic system again. So there is a breach of trust that might, let's say, hit me, that disappoints me, that hurts me. And then the question is, what do I get from the feeling? It's a bit of a crux, but I get something from the feeling. And I'd have to find out what. If I don't find out...
Okay, if I try to imagine this, for example, someone feels they let me down. Now I'm alone. I couldn't rely on them. But the other one may feel, what is wrong? They are lying to me. How can they take me for a fool?
I'll give you a typical example, which many viewers may also know, or at least have observed in the environment. Someone enters a new relationship and suddenly loses a lot of weight. So the relationship goes on for a year, then they gain weight again, then they change again. lose weight again. These are, for example, routines that run completely unconsciously, which are also not consciously comprehensible. The same applies to women who, for example, will experience violence. So, I have an acquaintance who has actually been regularly changing partners for 25 years. All the time the man had alcohol problems or was violent after a while. And she's not at all willing to look at it.
That comes from dad.
Exactly, that comes from the family side. So if she would solve that, then a man who has alcohol problems and is so aggressive, and maybe also becomes physically aggressive, would no longer resonate with her. But there's something here.
Yes, well, that can be explained, this inner child. Or the little girl only got this attention back then. And of course, she probably linked that to love. And then the adult doesn't realise it then. But of course, then we go back to the topic, to the roots. And then you can face this pain or this disappointment. It's also hard to look and then really go back to that childhood and yourself, to become aware that one has really associated this pain and this aggressiveness and violence with love. And this pattern then becomes permanent again. It's a shame because actually it's not rocket science.
Exactly. And we perceive that as bad. That's also the case. But the joke is, so this is really such a crux in human life, what we now perceive as bad is actually less bad than what we would clearly want. So I'll take the example of this woman who may be abused, but associates that with the father's attention. If she would then no longer have this abuse, she would feel no more attention from the father. And that would be worse than being abused. And these are things that are so crazy. But once you understand them, then suddenly it all really clicks. That means you can change your whole life. So, if I had €1 million, it would be worse than being in debt, because maybe then I'll no longer be loved by God. So these crazy things that are going on, we can't consciously see through them because they are very, very deeply anchored. They've nothing to do with analytical thinking. That's why I always need someone from the outside who reflects on me. So a coach, a companion who just tells me, hey, where are you actually? Because the funny thing is, you can look at my problems and analyse them really easily because you've no feeling for them. I can look at your problems, I have no feelings about them. I can analyse them. But my own things, I run around and have blind spots.
Yes, you just notice there's something there, but I can't get there. So sometimes there are real conflicts at the root where you think, my goodness, actually I've looked there many times and it is still not resolved, but it always goes one step further down. But accordingly, it is of course always more difficult to find a suitable partner. For example, when you have your first date, you sit across from someone who is a victim of life and constantly complains about what happened to them, and you just think, oh God, it'll take forever to explain that it's their own fault. That's the problem afterwards.
Absolutely. I mean, relationships are always a form of compromise, so that means we'll never find a partner who is a perfect match for us. Everyone has their skeletons in the closet, and in the end, it's a compromise.
It is also exhausting with a partner who always wants to analyse. It was like that. My husbands were just thinking, oh, for God's sake, I just have a cold. Everything is okay. They didn't even dare to say anything anymore because I always looked deeper. Wait, I'll take a quick look.
It's difficult too.
Yes, it's exhausting too. So a good
balance.
Yes. Definitely useful, but still nice when you're ready to look at things. It is certainly very interesting for the future, because by solving that, we also solve it on the energetic level, in the frequency, and then it no longer has any influence on our body. It doesn't have to mirror anything anymore. Therefore, we often have the problem in relationships that people get sick. Breast cancer, knee, osteoarthritis, hip. These are all...
Then it's the physical manifestation of imbalances.
Yes, and when you look at it, or actually use your technique that you developed there, the Neuro, did couples do that at the same time?
Exactly. We're actually making a very exciting thing. I don't know how much time we still have.
Oh, shit, yeah. Well, let's do it now. Tell it very quickly.
Very quickly. So, my wife's favourite thing, we've been working on how to work with sound since 2003. So, a sound therapy over the news. And we discovered a technique in 2003 that comes from India, where you can determine the individual bass tone of a person. That means, with this bass tone, I can harmonise and regulate myself physically. And the exciting thing is, when I now have two partners, a couple, then I can find out through this resonance of tones how they actually fit together. Where are the problems and where are the great opportunities? And I can regulate both partners through the tones. And with that, I automatically have a big step without having to do any conscious work. I don't have to do a regression, no summary, no coaching.
I don't have to drag my husband anywhere for any coaching. Interesting.
I basically just go in with the two basic tones and explain where the hurdle is actually in your relationship. Well, I'll give you an example. With my wife and me, we are two very different tones. For me, just an example, I'm thinking whilst I'm talking. Before, when we drove a long distance in the car, I talked all the time, but Simone thinks calmly. That means she was totally under stress because she thought she had to give me an answer, but I just talked. I wasn't so aware of that before. I didn't answer, and the point is I was stressed because she didn't answer, because I overloaded her with my speaking. These are interesting points when you just understand something about a partner as a basis. You can lie back and relax and say, if she doesn't say anything now, she's not angry at all. Because I always reflect only on myself. If I don't speak, I have a problem. And I reflected that on Simone as an example.
Great. So if you want to find out more now, where can you turn to?
Exactly. Best to go on news.tv. There are a lot of videos, basic explanations, also videos here on QS24. You can look at it all in peace. There are also links to the websites.
Great. Actually, we should still do a Relationships 2 interview. Very good. Thank you for being here today. And we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Dear viewers, you have seen that we had a lot of fun with this topic. And that's just what moves you again and again and can also be very funny. When you recognise yourself in your partner and your own issues. I hope you got something out for yourself too. Thank you for watching and see you soon. Bye.